So in order to move the food randomly, we have to make use of a random number generator. And in Python, there's a library that will take care of that for us, and that library is called random. To use it, we have to import random. And once we've done that, we can use functions that are in the random library to generate numbers between two numbers, and it will do it using a pseudo-random number and essentially giving you a number that has about an equal chance of being any of the numbers in between. For instance, if you wanted a random number from 1 to 10, you wouldn't know beforehand what that number was going to be, and it could have an equal chance to be any of the numbers between 1 and 10. And that's exactly what we want in order to move the food to a random spot on our game board, because we want it to be a surprise, so we can't plan it. We want the game to be interesting, so we want the food to move in a different way every time. And we want it to stay within the game board. So currently, our move food function moves the food always to 50, negative 100. So 50 is the x coordinate, that's the horizontal coordinate, and negative 100 is the y coordinate. So here's how that ends up working. When you run into the food, it goes there, and then it always goes there. So if I run into it again, you see it just kind of blinks because it's staying there. All right, so we wanted to move it to a random place. So to know, so the first thing we have to think about is, what is the space that we want it to remain within? And if we look at when we draw the borders, we have a space that goes in the x direction from negative 200 to 200. So it's a space, that spans all the way from here to there. And the same thing is true in the vertical direction. You've got a space from negative 200 to 200. So we want a number to be generated between those two numbers. However, let's think about this a second. We also want the game to be playable. So we could generate a random number that would place the food anywhere in this space, but there are some places in this space that are going to be somewhat problematic and difficult to get to. For instance, if it's placed in this corner, that is a very difficult challenge for the snake to eat the food. Not necessarily an impossible challenge, but we should think when we're creating a game about what situations that we are creating for our players to get into. So of course, in your game, you can decide what range you want to use for moving the food. I've decided that I would like to place this food somewhere so that it is not right up against the wall of the border. So instead of placing the food between negative 200 and 200 in the x direction and negative 200 and 200 in the y direction, I'm going to give it about, let's say 20. So the snake head is about 20 pixels by 20 pixels. I believe it's 21 by 21 exactly. I'm going to give it a buffer of 20 pixels away from each border. So that would be negative 180 to 180. So now that I've thought about the ranges that I want for my random numbers, I can actually write the code to generate those random numbers. And the time to generate that code is when it's time to move the food. So we have to find, there's the move food function. Oops, I lost it. Where's move food? There it is. Okay, so instead of moving to 5100, we want to move to our randomly generated number. So we could do this all in one line, but I would like to show you how this is working. So I'm going to make a variable for the random x coordinate, and I'm going to make a variable for the random y coordinate. And I'm going to set random x, or rand x, to random. that's the name of our library, dot randint, and that is the name of the function that will generate a random number for us. So I want to give the range for this number to be generated in. So the lower bound I want to be negative 180, and the upper bound I want to be 180. So it's going to give me a number between negative 180 and 180. And the same is true for rand y. It's the same thing. Okay, now that I've generated those two different random numbers, now if I generated one number and used that coordinate for my go-to for the turtle, it would move the food to the same xy value, or the same a place where x equals y. So it would actually always arrange them on a diagonal. So I want a different number for the x coordinate than for the y coordinate. Two random numbers. So I have to use those random numbers here. Okay, and now that I've made this change to the code, I should be able to run it and see what the consequence is, what the new behavior is. So when the turtle moves and I run it into the food, it now goes to a different place than it did before, and a different place that time as well. And so every time I run into it, it's going to be in a new place. And that is how you randomize the location of the food in our snake game.